Let's talk about M3GAN 2.0, which is the sequel to the film M3GAN, which went on to become a huge box office success in 2022. I think the movie was around less than $20 million to make and grossed over $180 million at the box office. So a sequel was inevitable. And this film also talks about things that are inevitable but can be very scary, which we'll talk about in a bit. But before we do, we got to get to 50,000 subscribers, y'all. So hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell. Let's get to it. Check out our videos we've done on 28 Years Later, as well as weapons. We have a 28 Years Later video today on the Bone Temple and our theories about what that could be. But let's get into our M3GAN 2.0 review, which I was so excited to watch. So I went to the screening last night, packed screening, and I will tell you, the audience was loving it all throughout. And this is just a reminder of how the M3GAN screening was a couple of years ago as well. Very lively crowd. This is a movie to watch with a group of people for sure. Now you have Allison Williams returning as Gemma, you have Violet McGraw returning as Cady, and you also have Jenna Davis as the voice of M3GAN here, of course. So before we get into my thoughts and opinions on it, the premise of this film takes place just about the same amount of time that we've gone on without M3GAN, right? 2 years after the events of M3GAN, Gemma has become an author and an advocate for regulation of artificial intelligence while trapping a still active M3GAN in a small harmless robotic doll. However, M3GAN's technology has been stolen and used by a defense contractor to create a military robot called Amelia, who becomes self-aware, turns on her creators, and attempts an AI takeover. Facing imminent destruction, Gemma's niece Cady convinces her to rebuild M3GAN with advanced upgrades so she can fight Amelia. And so basically that's your premise right here. You have Gerard Johnstone here returning to direct with a story from Akila Cooper. Always love Akila Cooper. Really absurd horror that just takes these very interesting leaps. And that's the case here as well. So I will start off with everything I loved about this film. I do love M3GAN in this film. I think the story and the film in itself really comes more alive once you bring back M3GAN into the fold. And that's not a knock on the other actors or anybody else in this, but I think there's just some charm and a sort of like heightened experience that comes with having M3GAN, because the absurdity really starts with her and it just goes and catapults to like a different level with this one. Whereas the first one had a bit more of a thriller, horror / sci-fi to it, this one's definitely more heavy on the sci-fi action with a slice, I feel, of horror sprinkled throughout. And that's not a bad thing, because I think that this franchise really thrives with what was highlighted here, because I think at its core that's what this movie really is. It's an absurd horror, dark, maybe not even horror, maybe dark comedy with light sprinkles of genre from action to sci-fi to horror, but it's a comedy, and I think that they are really tuning into that in this sequel here. So if you were kind of not happy with the comedy in M3GAN, you're probably not going to be eager at all with M3GAN 2.0, because they really double down on it, and I think it's a highlight, honestly. I really do love it. I do love that they're trying to talk about the serious issue that we're facing today as well with AI and how it's trying to be infiltrated into our lives, but at the same time, they're not even making our lives easier, so doesn't even make sense. That's a whole other conversation though. But I will tell you too, if you were looking for the action that was in the trailer, there's a ton of it here. This movie really does work well as an action film, and you could almost say it's the Mission Impossible film if it was a lot more lighthearted of sorts. That's how I can describe it. It is almost similar to Dead Reckoning in its AI premise, but that's a whole other video as well. I do believe though that there is a bit of a turn that happens throughout the film that kind of feels a little bit too like rushed as well, and that kind of falls more in line maybe with how the story is being presented, because I still think everybody else is great here, and I think it was trying to do a lot of things at once, so it kind of felt a bit rushed. There's certain characters that kind of get pushed to the side that you would have loved to see a little bit more interaction with, and I think it would have made that movie a little bit better. I feel if they really try to like size down in this movie, where they try to do a lot and they're trying to hit a lot of points, and then by the end it's just like, oh, we're already at the end, the film's over. I did find myself thinking, oh, this is definitely what's gonna happen, and then it happens, and then we're just hitting the beats at this point, right? Like we're just hitting it to the end of the story, and it can feel a little bit no pun intended, but robotic by the end. But I still think those like moments of emotion and where the film tries to get into a little bit of a quote unquote deeper philosophical talk, I think that is definitely what sort of keeps it going and not making it feel like it's just generic of sorts. But I did love this first half of the film where it felt a little bit more surprising, keeping you on your toes, wondering what happens next. But at the end, it sort of started to just become the same old sci-fi like story and action films and thrillers and all of that, where I thought the first half was so surprising and fresh. I really do love that first half a lot more than its second half. But overall, I still think that M3GAN 2.0, especially if you're a fan of the first M3GAN, is a must watch. I thought it was hilarious. I really did find myself getting emotional at points in this one, which kind of surprised me as well. And yes, M3GAN does have another solo song in this one. So if for anything, that's the only reason you go watch it, I do think it's worth the watch, especially on the big screen for that solo song. Overall, I am definitely a fan of M3GAN. I want to see more in this universe. We do have another film in this universe coming out in about 6 months, which is Soulmate, which I'm curious about how they're going to tie that in here with this one. But I still think that we definitely should see more M3GAN in the future, and I would be excited to see what they do with a M3GAN 3. The ending kind of sort of implies there is more to this universe than we know, so I'm excited to see how it all comes together. But overall, M3GAN 2.0, great laughs, great action, very, very absurd, much more absurd than the first one, which I thought was great. I do think it lacks at the beginning, right before you get M3GAN back into the fold, but once she gets into the fold, it really takes off. But I still think that final like third of the film is very staggering and it kind of fumbles a bit here and there, but I think there's certain key moments throughout that third act, especially the finale, that really do bring it home by the end. But I think the tone and everything that they've chosen to go into and the strengths that they're really pulling are going to make that next film that much better. But we'll see. I still think it's an evolving type of film and doing its own thing, which I love. I love when there's films that are just like gonna be their own type of film and they don't care what's going on with the rest of the scene, and that's what M3GAN 2.0 is. Overall, recommend this one. Check it out in theaters if you love the first M3GAN. If you didn't love the first M3GAN, you're not gonna love this one at all. I think you might definitely not like it as much for sure, but overall very pleased with what I saw here. But make sure you follow us for more on things you love. We'll talk more spoilers on M3GAN tomorrow, so stay tuned for that video where we dive deeper into the story, and I'm very excited to talk more about that. But as always, I'll see all of you next time. Stay safe, stay positive.